have to say goodbye. Remember me. Don't let it make you cry. For even if I'm far away, I won't sing a secret song to you each night we are apart. Remember me. Though I have to travel far, remember me. Each time you hear a sad guitar, know that I'm with you the only way that I can be, until you're in my arms again.
By the way, this is going to be recorded, the whole thing, available online.
Yeah.
Remember me. Though I have to say goodbye, remember me. Don't let it make you cry, for even if I'm far away, I hold you in my heart. I sing a secret song to you each night we are apart. Remember me. Though I have to travel far, remember me. Each time you hear a sad guitar, know that I'm with you the only way that I can be, until you're in my arms again.
On behalf of our family here at Hollyburn, we welcome all you here with us today in person. We also welcome our good friends that are not being able to be with us today and are being scanned and videoed through technology today. We welcome all of them here today. We have a wonderful service for you, and to start, I have a wonderful celebrant, Colleen Kendall, will be coming up. Colleen, if you could join us, and we will start our service today. Thank you again so much for being here today.
But each one of us has his own encyclopedia written. It grows out of each soul. It's written from birth onwards, the hundreds of thousands of pages pressed against each other, and yet with air in between them. These are special words by a famous Swedish poet, Thomas Transomer, as a respectful nod to Julia's heritage. My name is Colleen Kendall, as Bruce mentioned, and I'm personally honored to officiate the service of remembrance, life celebration, and tribute for Julia Mullins. A death has occurred, and everything is changed by the event. We are painfully aware that life can never be the same, that yesterday is over, that relationships once rich have ended. But there is another way to look upon that truth. If life went on the same without the presence of the one who has died, we could only conclude that the life we remember made no contributions, filled no space, meant nothing. The fact that the person left behind a place that cannot be filled is the highest tribute to this individual. And this individual is Julia Mullins. Life can be the same after a trinket is lost, but never after the loss of a treasure. And though we must bravely face the fact of Julia's passing, we owe it to her and to yourselves to look at the bigger picture of her life. And that is choosing not to focus on how she died, but rather how she lived. Today is Julia's Day. However unwelcome and surreal and painful for the family that it may be, paying tribute to her life and what she gave to each of you and left you with in very different ways is only fitting. And to acknowledge that a special life and person has been lost in the physical sense, yet never of her larger than life spirit, soul, or life energy. We are here to remember, share in, and pay tribute to Julia's memories and life stories, and also to take this opportunity to reflect and learn from her life legacy. And we are here to share some of the many, many special moments, milestones, and chapters in Julia's highly respectable length of life at the age of 95. So today is, in fact, Julia's Day. We are mostly here for Julia's family and extended family members who loved and embraced her fully and completely, and all that she had to offer as a woman, a mother, grandmother, aunt, and a close friend and confidant to many, who lived the life to the very best of her ability. Many of us are proponents of the concept that death occurs to teach us life lessons. But no matter how it occurs or under what circumstances, the only lessons to be learned lie in the life that has been lived. Every life is special. Every life has a purpose and a meaning, and every life is to be protected and celebrated, no matter what. And no doubt, March 25th, 1926, was cause for celebration for parents Guy, Leslie, Oliver, and Matilda Mayvina Sherland, when Julia, their sixth child, blessed this earth. She was born in New Westminster, joining her other 5 siblings. Now we'll hear more about Julia's many chapters and colorful life from those who knew her best very shortly. While death ends a life, it does not end the relationships formed within that life. And in reflecting on these words and appreciating that visuals and photographs truly embody memories and reflections that need no words, we will take a few quiet minutes of reflection to visually look back on Julia's life with its many chapters. But before we do, we're privileged to hear a beautiful piece sung by Camille, one of Julia's beloved granddaughters, and it's called Remember Me.
Remember me, remember me, though I have to say goodbye, remember me. Don't let it make you cry, for even if I'm far away, I hold you in my heart. I sing a secret song to you each night we are apart. Remember me, though I have to travel far. Remember me, each time you hear a sad guitar, know that I'm with you the only way that I can be, until you're in my arms again. Remember me. Remember me, though I have to say goodbye. Remember me, don't let it make you cry, for even if I'm far away, I hold you in my heart. I sing a secret song to you each night we are apart. Remember me, though I have to travel far. Remember me, each time you hear a sad guitar, know that I'm with you the only way that I can be, until you're in my arms again. Remember me.
Many, many thanks to Camille for such a beautiful piece. Thank you, Camille. Now, just shortly, in 1 or 2 minutes, we'll be watching a really wonderfully prepared slideshow on Julia's life, and as I mentioned, her many chapters in her 95 years. There will just be a brief pause for technical reasons, perhaps 1 or 2 minutes before the visuals and photographs begin. So not to be concerned, that's just a short pause. Thank you. The one thing special about memories and photographs and visuals of the past, history, for lack of a better term, is that they bring smiles to our hearts. They tend to erase, if not at the moment, little by little, the heartache or loss felt right now. And most importantly, they belong to us forever, to visit and revisit whenever we need their healing warmth. While people are taken away from us, and always will, memories and photographs are something that we have that can never be taken away. And speaking of memories, we'll hear first from Doug, and followed very shortly thereafter by a wonderful call from Julia's niece, Julie Acree from Alberta. And then following Doug and Julie will be Chris to speak at greater length about Julia's life, and Tim Colwell, a long-time loyal landscaper of Julia's. So Doug, if you would please.
May I remove? Oh,
No, you can take it off, whatever you feel comfortable with.
take it off?
Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Douglas Oliver Mullins. I can remember when I was 5 or 6 years old, my mother explained to me how I got my middle name, her maiden name, but it was more than that connection. At that time, there were only 5 sisters alive. She lost her big brother, age 6. She was age 4. And I was given a name to carry it on to future generations in his honor, Billy Oliver. I should also add that amongst the sisters, the Oliver sisters, Mom is the last. So I feel especially honored to carry on the Oliver tradition. Billy's name was William Rutherford Oliver. His grandfather's name was William Rutherford Oliver. And the senior William Rutherford got his middle name from his mother, Jemima Rutherford. What a beautiful name, Jemima Rutherford. She married Adam Scott Oliver, who got his middle name from his mother, Agnes Scott. Her maiden name, I should say. William Rutherford Oliver's Sr.'s wife's name was Lizzie Halliday. A number of her descendants' sons got the Halliday name as a middle name. So there's a long tradition of passing maiden names to children, probably 10 times amongst Mom's ancestors. I'm going to talk about the 2 branches of family history here and some of the interesting people and circumstances that they lived through. So there were 2 halves, the Swedish half, we mentioned earlier, and the Scottish half. The Olivers were the Scots. The Sherlins were the Swedes. Swedes were special. They came from a little town called Älvdalen in Sweden, emigrated to Minnesota, 1881, 3 generations, and settled near Mora, Minnesota for about 20 years when they moved to Alberta, Wetaskiwin area. Through this, both Sweden, Minnesota, and Alberta, they farmed, and the men did logging and lumber production. But what is unique about Älvdalen is that it had its own unique language within Sweden. It's called Älvdalian. It's one of those rare cases where a language comes from the name of a town, or perhaps it was the other way around. But this Älvdalian language is as different from traditional Swedish, current Swedish, as English is from Greek. Virtually incomprehensible from each side, whether you're Swedish listening to Älvdalian or vice versa. This language had its own written alphabet that was runic in origin. The runes were the writings of the Vikings. And in fact, further study of Älvdalian showed that indeed this had been a language spoken by the Vikings. Now, how is that possible? Well, Älvdalen is very isolated in Sweden. It's well inland, separated by several hundred kilometers from population centers in Sweden. It had been so for hundreds of years. So in its isolation, they managed to protect and live with the Älvdalian language. Undoubtedly, the family brought that language to Minnesota and probably to a degree to Alberta, and gradually it faded away as English took over from schools and community and so on. So that was one of the stories I've chatted with my mother about over the years. She had no idea this was a part of her history, and nor had I until that discovery. The Viking connection, 800 to 1200 years of a language protected and preserved. Roughly 2,500 people in the world today speak that language. On the Scottish side, I mentioned Jemima Rutherford and Adam Scott Oliver. They were the first Scots to come to Canada. 1848, they came to Galt, Ontario, where Mum's father and grandfather were born. Within a few years, Adam Scott Oliver and his brother, who came over a couple of years later, had owned and operated a soap and candle factory in Galt. Galt was a very busy industrial town full of Scots. 2 Scottish churches, 5 minutes walk from each other. He ran this busy soap and candle making business. There's an inventory done in 1861, describes him with annual sales of tens of thousands of pounds of soap and of candles sold every year. More than that, what is interesting is his obituary. And I'll just pull that up. I found this about 2 years ago in Galt in the archives there when I was visiting. Second part of this says, for the past 12 or 13 years he's been engaged in the manufacture of soap and candles. Mr. Oliver was unassuming in his demeanor, a good citizen, a kind neighbor, a fond parent, and much respected by all who knew him. In January, he was last elected a member of the Galt Town Council. Didn't know that until a couple of years ago. Mom didn't know that. But has held the same office in former years. A special meeting of the council was called on Friday evening last, which resolution was passed by the members present, expressing their respect for the deceased and sympathy for his bereaved wife and family. He left 9 or 10 children. He died at age 38, remarkably young to have accomplished that. The mayor and councilors in body attended the funeral. which took place Saturday afternoon last, to the place of interment in St. Andrew's burying ground. I visited that burying ground. There are no markers left there. But what was interesting is his soap and candle factory was about a 5-minute walk away from that cemetery. So an honorable Oliver example right there. In the early 2000s, about 20 years ago, Mom and Dad came to visit us in Chicago. I asked Mom what she would first like to see. And I thought she'd say the Art Institute of Chicago. She loved the Impressionists, but her first on her list was Frank Lloyd Wright's home and studio, which I'd seen a couple of years before, and it left a distinct impression on me about his architecture, the man, and architecture in general. So we went and paid a visit, had a wonderful time. Adjacent to the home and studio are 3 more Frank Lloyd Wright homes, all along Forest Street. Just a quick background, Frank Lloyd Wright is probably the most famous architect in America, well known around the world, a real revolutionary in architecture, and you can see that in his work. So what does that have to do with the Olivers other than the visit that we made? Several years after that, I found John R. Oliver in Chicago, born in Galt, Ontario. Perfect match for the John R. Oliver in the archives, Canadian census records. He had emigrated from Galt to Chicago in the 1870s, married a Canadian woman there, and lived in Oak Park, which is where the Frank Lloyd Wright home and studio was. In the 1920, in the various censuses, he was described as a building manager and a bookkeeper. No big deal. But in the 1921 census, it had his address, and it was Forest Street in Oak Park. I thought, that's cool. Let's zoom in. You Google Earth, zoom in to his house number, and it was about 100 yards from Frank Lloyd Wright's home and studio, less than half a block away from Frank Lloyd Wright's home and studio. He lived there until 1926 when he passed away, in the era of Frank Lloyd Wright and his business run there. So it was really cool, probably rubbed shoulders, great. Now what I've been looking at were indexes, census records in print that have been transcribed. When I looked at the actual census document, his job was described as bookkeeper for architectural firm. At that moment, he lived 100 yards from Frank Lloyd Wright's home and studio. So 99%, I am 99% convinced he was an employee of Frank Lloyd Wright. Very, very cool. And love telling my mother that story. Another brother of Adam Scott Oliver was a John R. Oliver. Say the Olivers moved over in 1848, small group. Adam Scott Oliver's parents and remaining siblings moved over 4 years later. They didn't stop in Galt. They moved to Wisconsin, a tiny little town called Mifflin, about 3 hours drive from where I live. One of their children, George Leslie Oliver, interestingly, Mom's father was Guy Leslie Oliver. Don't know if there was any connection there, but it's an interesting coincidence just the same. George Leslie Oliver became a Baptist minister, studied in Wisconsin, studied in Ontario, not far from Galt. In fact, he was shown as an employee of the soap and candle factory in 1861, working with 2 of his brothers. He finished his studies and practiced his ministry in small towns all over Ontario, got married, had several children, moved to New York State, continued his work there, had a daughter, Edith. I should say George Leslie Oliver died in 1895, a few months after his wife did, but he made arrangements for his young children to be distributed to his wife's family back in Ontario. Edith Oliver was one of them. She eventually married a Baptist minister whose name was one moment. Sarah Edith married John Campbell Bowen in Ontario in 1906, Perth, Ontario. He was an interesting man. In addition to his ministry, he sold insurance. He also joined the Canadian Expeditionary Force in World War I and was a chaplain, the Canadian Army in the battlefields of Europe. Very distinguished career. Came back to Edmonton, Alberta, where he became a city councillor, again, with Edith Oliver at his side. He also became a provincial legislative member, was leader of the opposition Liberal Party for a number of years. And then in 1937, he became the Lieutenant Governor of Alberta. He was, in fact, the longest serving Lieutenant Governor in Alberta history, from 1937 to 1950, and very interesting career as a Lieutenant Governor. Much controversy early in his career with battles with the Alberta Premier. I won't go into detail about that, but it's well worth a look. So Edith Oliver put her family papers, the Oliver family papers, which had been accumulating over the generations, in the Alberta archives. And I lucked out, found them, found a record of them, and then about 10 years ago I asked my cousin, my mom's niece, Diane in Edmonton, if she wouldn't mind going into the archives and opening up this box of papers and make photocopies for me, which she did, and which was wonderful in filling some of the gaps and confirming much of the information I already had. So, very interesting, colorful history, wonderful conversations with Mom and other members of the family about her heritage. I will continue that work. It's a fascination for me. My great disappointment is I won't be able to share that with Mom, but she was a great mother, a great listener, wonderful friend. She will be missed, so thank you for listening. We're now going to connect with Julie Acree in Lethbridge, Alberta. One moment, please. Hello, Julie.
Hello.
Sound okay here?
Hi, Doug.
Hello, Julie. Very nice of you to join us here.
Well, I'm glad to do it. Very happy to do it.
Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Julie or Julia Soper Acree, and my mother was one of my Auntie Julie's sisters. First of all, before I get into that, for the family there, for Chris and Doug, I just want to tell you that Dave is very sorry he couldn't be here today with me. Today was a working day for him, and so he had to go into the office. And so he will watch the live stream later on. I think you can watch it later on. So he wasn't able to be here. But my mom, being one of Auntie Julie's sisters, named me for Auntie Julie and Julia. And so have always felt very honored to carry her name. So Julia Oliver Mullins, was the youngest child in a family of 4 other sisters. As Doug mentioned, she had a brother who was born 2 years before her, but he was tragically killed in an explosion. So Julia Oliver then grew up with 4 sisters. She was the youngest of them, my mother being one of these sisters. Auntie Julie's 4 sisters were all women of very strong opinions, my mother included in that, and that's not a bad thing. But I remember my Auntie Julie as always being a very calm and gentle and gracious person. She was different from her sisters in that way, and I think that that's because of that. It seemed to me she was always able to stay above the fray in things. I have memories of times with Auntie Julie and Uncle Norm, our families together. But of course, after I was married and moved away, I only saw Auntie Julie and Uncle Norm when we visited Vancouver. Auntie Julie and Uncle Norm were very good to my mom and dad, very generous. My parents spent a good amount of time with them, and there were times when we visited my mom and dad, and then we went and visited Auntie Julie and Uncle Norm, that they treated us often by taking us out to dinner. And then when we visited with my own family, my kids, my own children, remember them taking us to the salmon house a few times. And that was always a fun time and a treat for us. I had a chance to visit with Auntie Julie in August of 2019, 1.5 years ago. She had moved into her senior's residence and took great pleasure in showing me around the place. That was the last time I saw her in person. But before then, and since that visit, we regularly had FaceTime calls between us. I enjoyed those calls just to check up on her and see how she was doing. She had lots of things to tell me, even though she was in a senior's place. She'd tell me what was going on in the senior's place. I always asked about Doug and Chris and Stephen and just, what's going on with them. And so she always had family stuff to tell me, and I really enjoyed that. On her 95th birthday, I was just getting ready to FaceTime her to wish her a happy birthday when I received a call from Chris telling us that she had passed away. I was so sad. For me, she was the last link to my mother's family. But mostly, you as family and friends and us, we lost a very caring, generous, gracious lady who was and is loved by her sons, their families, and by others who knew her. Our deepest sympathy goes to Chris and Doug and Stephen and their families in the loss of their mom and grandmother. Dave and I and our family share in your sadness and your loss. And we will always remember her. I will always remember her because I carry her name and I just remember the time spent with her. So our sympathies to you, to all of you there, and we'll be thinking about you in the future. So that's my little talk, Doug.
That was wonderful. Thank you very, very much, Julie.
You're welcome. Our thoughts are with you.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. Chris? We'll continue.
Chris, yeah. Oh, please, Chris. And thanks very much, Doug and Julia have a couple of comments on that later.
When I first began putting my thoughts to paper, I wondered what significant events took place in 1926, the year Julia was born. So I did a quick Google, and just two fascinating things that are hard for us to imagine. 20th Century Fox had just bought the patent that would add sound to film. And there was a scientist named Robert Goddard. He launched the first liquid-fueled rocket, not into space, but just a few hundred feet into the air. It's utterly amazing to realize how different our lives are today compared to the world Julia was brought into 95 years ago. From that perspective, I want to share with you two vastly different parts of Julia's life, particularly her early years, that had a profound effect in the shaping of this wonderful wife, mother, grandmother, sister, aunt, friend, and resident of Amica that we knew so well. Julia Acree made mention of one terrible incident. In 1929, the year of the stock market crash, when Julia was just 4 years old, her 6-year-old brother Billy was playing with something that he found in the house from the previous people who rented it. It turned out to be a canister containing blasting caps, and whatever he did, he set it off. Billy was killed instantly, and from our mother's description, she was sprayed by shrapnel from her cheeks to her knees. She and her neighbor's child were both rushed to hospital in critical condition. Julia carried those scars for the rest of her life, including the loss of one finger from her right hand. And it wasn't until she was 40 years old before the last piece of metal was removed from her body. Somewhere around 1931, 1932, Julia's family left the house to enjoy a picnic out together. But upon returning home, they found their house had been burned to the ground and they lost everything. And it may have been subsequent to that event, but Julia told us of a period of time having just one toy, and it was a very simple doll made of one piece of, in those days, celluloid, not even plastic, and without any clothes. But there was one huge event that left an indelible memory in her life, and it was the day 2 Salvation Army workers showed up at the front door, and they asked for Julie, and they presented her with a box containing a brand new doll. She just couldn't believe it. Clearly someone had noticed this little girl and contacted them, and they did that for her. And although Julia supported many charities, from this event I came to understand why she had a special place in her heart for the Salvation Army throughout her life. Although our mother and her siblings never went without food, their daily lives in the Depression years were a constant struggle. She told us of a time the power was shut off because her parents couldn't afford the electric bill. On another occasion, their parents actually skipped out on rent. They moved out the family in the middle of the night. There was a time when her father was unemployed, and it was her mother, with the only skill she had, she ran a boarding house in order to help pay the bills. And I remember a time our mother described to us the intimate details of one particular dress she received. It was so special. She was 12 years old. Up to that point, all she had known was hand-me-down clothes. And if you can imagine, as Julia Acree said, she had 4 older sisters. So I wonder, what was the state of those clothes by the time it finally got down to Julia? She had an interesting perspective in one comment that was, I thought, really interesting. As a kid, and her, I guess her siblings They considered someone who simply had a job as being rich, to give a perspective of what the Depression years were like. But in the years and the decades that followed, our mother and father worked hard to support a growing family and to help make our lives growing up so incredibly different from their own. Fortunately, most of Julia's life was vastly different from those early years, and I feel her last 3 years were very, very happy ones, and I'd like to share with you some of that. After coming to terms with the loss of her father, of her husband, our father, in 2018, I feel our mother really came into her own. And in that period of time, I learned so much about her. In that same year, our mother made the decision to transition into a senior living environment. We drove all over the North Shore, visiting various retirement homes. But on her own, one day she heard that Amica Lions Gate Senior Living was having an open house. Well, she just about left a cloud of smoke behind her car, spinning her tires on her way there. She was so keen to check it out. And Julia fully embraced Amica and her new lifestyle there. Our thanks to Laura Ferguson, the general manager, for leading such a wonderful team of caring, thoughtful, selfless professionals at all levels. And her family would like to thank all the Amica staff, especially, got a few names here: Rowena, Marianne, Muriel, Marissa, Mary Noel, Cherry, Vanessa, Agnes, Miriam, Brooke, and their chef, Aman. Shortly after our mother moved in, I recall an early visit when she said, "I want to show you something." And she took me into the bedroom, and there on her bed was all her laundry, freshly washed, folded in neat little stacks. And after 75, 80 years of doing other people's laundry, she was pretty excited that now other people were doing her laundry. And she was almost giddy about that. Fridays for Julia involved a trip to the hairstylist because she wanted to look her best for happy hour in the bistro at Amica, where she would chat over a glass of wine with her small group of friends who were also residents of Amica. Initially, this happy hour get-together in the bistro included wine and beer, until one day I saw one of the support workers going like this. And I said to Mom, "Oh my God, Mom, look, Amica's gone even more upscale. You can now get a martini." So life was very good there. Before the COVID crackdown, she enjoyed hosting visitors in the bistro. She had visits from Tim, her landscaper, who you'll hear from shortly. The wonderful Steads came to visit, and her most treasured friend, Elizabeth Liddell, who's here with us now. Of course, Amica had all sorts of activities that Julia could participate in. And the one she enjoyed the most was called You Be the Judge. A lovely staff worker named Grace would describe a court case, and the residents would decide the outcome before being told what the judge decided. Mom thought she was actually pretty good at this, and I had to ask the obvious question: did being married to a lawyer for 65 years help you at all? She said, that probably had something to do with it. As wonderful as life at Amica was, she would on occasion blast out of there for a change of scenery and what she called to see fresh faces. We went for endless walks on the seawall. She looked forward to meeting up with her friend Sigrun and her fellow walkers, and at the end of the walk they would get together for coffee and chat and whatnot. She really looked forward to those times. Our mother looked forward to going for drives. We went up the mountain, down the mountain, across the mountain, Horseshoe Bay, Deep Cove, Horseshoe Bay, Deep Cove. We covered just about every street on the North Shore. but she just liked so much the change of scenery. And what I remember most about those drives is that when she'd had enough, she'd often say to me, "I think it's time for an ice cream cone." And so we would start the hunt to go find a couple of ice cream cones. 3 years ago, I corrupted my mother. Yes, I did. When I introduced her to port. Port is like a fortified wine, and she took to it like a fish. It became her go-to drink whenever we went out for dinner. In fact, there's one particular restaurant that Doug and Liz and I visited last night, where as soon as the staff saw Julia coming in, and as she's taking off her coat, they would put down a glass of port for her. She really liked that. And I can still hear Mum saying, "Ooh, that's smooth." She liked that so much. Of course, after all this busting out of Amica for some extra fun, I got a few calls from your mother over the last few years saying, "Christopher, I need to go shopping. My clothes seem to have shrunk again." I wanted to share these incredibly diverse aspects of Julia's life because although she was given the opportunity to live a wonderful and refined lifestyle, she never forgot her humble roots. She always took an interest in people and treated everyone she met with the respect and honor they deserved. When she was first diagnosed with this terrible illness last October, the first words she spoke were, "Well, I've lived a great life." And she certainly did. Next, as we were walking out of the hospital, she gave me explicit instructions. Do not tell anyone, because she simply didn't want to burden others or make them feel sad because of her situation. Even after hearing the most devastating news possible, her concerns were about everyone else. It's just who she was. After Julia passed away, Douglas found a letter from 2006. It was sent to her mother from the wife of a lawyer who worked with my father. And I wanted to share with you one paragraph because it so wonderfully describes who Julia was. And it goes as follows. When we first met in Ottawa, I was very young, green, ignorant of many basic skills and tenets of civil and gracious society. And I really did observe and learn from you. You were always kind, dignified, tasteful, and attractive in style and manner, without being priggish or stuffy, and with a lively sense of humor. Julia made a positive difference in this world, especially in the lives of so many people she met over a very long life. I find it difficult to accept that our mother is gone, but she will live in our hearts forever. Thank you.
Just before we hear from Tim, I want to sincere thanks to Doug and Chris. Firstly, Doug, I'm going to guess that you are in charge of the family tree and genealogy. I am in awe of your remembering names and dates and family legacy relationships. Amazing, and those were fabulous array of stories, Chris. And thank you. Thank you so much for that. And as well from Julie in Alberta, who will be viewing this a little bit later, perhaps. So Tim, if we could, oh, he's on the phone. Okay, this is Tim Colwell, Julie's longtime landscaper. Thank you.
Hello, Tim.
Hey, how are you?
Very well, thank you. We've all gathered next to Mom here. If you would like to say a few words.
Yeah, I'm watching it now.
Good. Go ahead, Tim. I don't know if we can FaceTime you.
Okay.
Give it a try.
Oh,
Yes, we can.
hello?
Hello, Tim.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes.
Hey.
Go
All
ahead.
right.
Good. Very well.
Hi, everybody. So my name is Tim Caldwell, and I have been. Should I go? Can I go?
Yes, you can.
Oh, sorry. I had to turn my other ones off. Okay. So my name is Tim Caldwell. I have been lucky enough to spend the past 12 or so years working for Julia Mullins in the garden. I'll be very brief. I just wanted to say a few things about my experience with Mrs. Mullins because I think it might be nice to hear a different perspective on how she treated me, which was very unlike many of my other clients in gardening, in the gardening business. And I say client just out of the technical aspect of the term because I felt like my relationship with Mrs. Mullins was far more than your typical client-gardener relationship. It resembled more of a friendship that I'm so thankful to have had. Because for me, my grandmothers on both sides had passed away when I was very young, so I never really had a grandma to sit and talk to until I met Miss Mullins. And whether she knew it or not, she immediately kind of filled that role for me. And when it came to paying her bills when she was living in Amica, she would invite me over to have coffee and cookies. And next thing I would know, 4 hours will have passed, and I would have eaten maybe 12 cookies. And our conversations would range all over the place, from politics to artwork and artists to we would be talking about her new neighbors. And we kind of came to the conclusion that many of the ones with the limited cognitive ability tended to have very stressful past careers. So we kind of decided it's best to just not work too hard in our lives. Although, looking at her, the art she created, I have a feeling she was a very hard worker herself. Every time Miss Mullins and I would begin a conversation, she would always start with checking in with me and asking me about my life, whether it be about like my experiences in university as a mature student or my home life, or more importantly, it would always revert back to how my dogs were doing. And when my first dog, Gwendolyn, passed away, naturally, for me, the first client that I called to talk to about was Miss Mullins. And she helped me through some of the hardest parts of that for me. So naturally, when I got my second dog, Florence, Miss Mullins was the first person I brought her to. I was also hoping to introduce Florence to Norm, but he had just moved, I think it was 2 or 3 days prior to me getting Florence. So the next best plan or option was we staged a little photo shoot in the backyard that she could then bring to Norm to view on the iPad. I just felt like this was another small example of the many ways Mrs. Mullins naturally would just think of someone else before herself. It seemed like she was always looking out for everybody else before herself. And to this day, I'm just amazed that she had such a genuine interest in my life, because I'm just the gardener, and 99% of my work, people want me to make their property look nice and get out, which is totally acceptable, but it was never the feeling that I got when I would be working with Mrs. Mullins. And from the few of you that I've met in the family, I can see that the way she's treated other people like me, or probably everyone else that worked for her, it has been passed down through her children and grandchildren. I'm so thankful for the conversations I've had with Doug and Chris and Stephen, and this whole family has just treated me better than any other client has, and I think that it all stemmed from Ms. Mullins and how she lived her life and treated people. Ms. Mullins made my life better in ways that she didn't even know, just because kindness and thoughtfulness was so second nature to her, and it never waned. And thank you guys for listening. I just wanted to give you a perspective maybe from the gardener that could be helpful, just to, confirm everybody's beliefs that Miss Mullins was just such an incredible person, and all our lives were better for having got to share time with her. Thank you very much. I think that's all I have.
Thank you very much, Tim. That was
Thank you. All of
excellent.
watching. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Watching on the screen.
Continue, yes.
Thank
Well, again, sincere thanks to Doug and Chris, Julie and Tim especially. Clearly to Julia Mullins, you were far more than just her professional gardener, landscaper, and really fabulous memory. So thank you so much. Thank you to all of you. And what a tribute to Julia, because truly no one can capture moments in time, remembrances, and special memories that are true to life and heartfelt, like family and close friends. And it's not an easy task to share, especially at a time of losing someone special and so well loved. And it's greatly appreciated, I'm sure, by all who are watching the service today. Before we close the service today, we'll be listening to this just amazing piece called Pied Jésus. So we'll, in memory of Julia. And I believed it was a very special piece, if I recall, with Norm Mullins as well. So we'll take a few quiet minutes. Doug will facilitate playing this beautiful piece. Thank you.
So my mother and father both loved this piece of music. We surprised them 10 years ago at a special musical event hosted by my parents when my wife and daughter came in the room and sang the duet of Pied Jésus. Now, it's not Wi-Fi, it's Bluetooth. Bose Color Sound Link connecting. Let me just play this over the microphone. This is my wife singing with a lady named Grace Whipfley. Performed a few weeks ago, recorded. Marilyn and Grace Whitfield.
absolutely beautiful and just a fabulous selection. Thank you, Elaine and Grace both. It just added a very well appreciated and lovely touch to Julia's service. There are so many significant years of history and intimate knowledge established in your collective personal relationships and with Julia and your memories of her. One can never replicate or replace the history of your own special journey with her in that sense. These are treasured memories and knowledge that each one of you have of Julia that are yours alone. Because when we lose someone, everyone loses them differently. Adult children, close family members, and those of you that have known Julia on very different levels and had different kind of friendships or relationship with her. Therefore, the loss is very personal to each person. The collage of unique descriptives, qualities and characteristics of Julia, including her passions and interests, are distinct and many, in addition to what has already, all those that have been shared here today. But these were some of the descriptive echoes that were shared with me in discussions with Chris and Doug, and I think it's important just to highlight some of these, which include her pride in her Swedish heritage and demonstrated honor of her parents. Her belief in the importance in raising her children, of being a good person with solid core values in terms of respectful, honorable, kind behavior and the spoken word. Her unwavering positive relationships with her sisters and continued belief in family togetherness. Her innate sense of beautiful grooming and personal presentation. Her kind, thoughtful, gracious, caring, and good-humored manner. Her love of nature and gardening, knowing each and every plant, I'm told. Her abilities in creating a beautiful, warm, welcoming home and ambiance. Her ability and skill, along with Norm, in hosting fabulous Christmases and family get-togethers year after year. Her love of painting and walking the seawall. Her great passion for reading books and stories of all kinds. And her sincere enjoyment of living at Amica and all it offered during the latter chapters of her life. As my own father used to say, from that very generation, you can't buy class. You either have it or you don't. And it's that simple. And as I recall from having the privilege of meeting Julia myself, she had a great deal of natural class in addition to her countless other gifts and attributes. Human nature is never ready to let someone go, no matter the age, circumstances, or how well prepared we think we may be for an imminent death. And the loss is real, and the pain is real, and it is truly a personal journey and individually experienced differently, as I just mentioned. Today we've come to share with Julia's family their loss of a mother, grandmother, and aunt, and mother-in-law, to Elaine and Tammy and her beloved granddaughters Heidi and Cami, and all those many nieces and nephews she cared for so deeply, as well as those who were her true friends, and she a confidant to them. And we're here to provide sincere, caring support to one another during this time of transition for the family following the loss of Julia. But on behalf of the family, allow me to express sincere thanks for your presence here and those who will be watching the service from afar, perhaps later today. Thank you very much for being here to celebrate and pay tribute to the special, unique life of Julia Mullins. Let us give sincere gratitude for her life and all that she so well modeled, and everything she left behind to be remembered, honored, and treasured. And as you leave here today, may you take your own memories of her, tuck them away in a special place in your hearts and minds where they will never be forgotten. May you remember that you're ambassadors and caretakers of Julia's legacy and honor what she believed in, what was important to her, her life values, and how she lived her life so well for as long as she could and to the best of her ability. 95, as I mentioned, being a highly respectable age. The greatest dignity to be found in death is the dignity of the life that preceded it. This is a form of hope that we can all achieve, and it is the most abiding of all. Hope resides in the meaning of what our lives have been. And unquestionably, what a full and meaningful life Julia had. And I will say this, just briefly, a brief interjection. Norm, Julie, and family and the legacy they created and left behind was created during the best days of old Vancouver. I will say that, and I think we all remember, how much that has changed. So they would have this life they created and the family and all these fabulous memories, not without struggles, as all family has had, but it really was, in my mind, because of my parents, some of the best years in old Vancouver as it was. I'd like to, once again, thank Doug and Chris for your time over the phone and allowing me to learn more about Julia's special life and who she was as a person. And it's really, truly been an honor for me to act as an officiant and celebrant for her service, especially given the fact that I was privileged only for a very small window of time in meeting Julia, but at least I was privileged and did get to know her a little bit at the time Norm passed. So I'm very grateful for that, and thank you for inviting me to conduct her service today. I'd like to close with the following piece, if I may. She has achieved success who has lived well, laughed often, and loved much, who has gained respect of intelligent men and women and the love of little children, who has filled her niche and accomplished the task, who has left the world better than she found it, who has never lacked appreciation of earth's beauty or failed to express it, who has looked for the best in others and given the best she had, whose life was an inspiration. Now I understand shortly following the service, the family's planning to meet and gather with those who can attend at Earl's. Not a lot of choices right now, but there's a beautiful patio area at Earl's, and a chance for you to gather again, continue to share memories and remembrances of Julia, and raise a toast to her as you overlook the ocean and the seawall and visualize, and she may just be walking by just at that point. So hold on to that thought. You never know when she'll make her presence known. So enjoy yourselves in her memory, and thanks to all of you for your support and caring presence here today. It's been an honor. I'm going to ask Bruce Meldrum, our funeral director, to come forward with closing remarks. Thank you.
I'm truly not sure what I can add. It's a wonderful service, a wonderful tribute. Thank you for all. Thank you for all the ones viewing here. I'll leave you with one thing and one thing only, and that is we truly never lose the ones we love. They walk beside us every day, unseen, unheard, but always here and always here. Thank you to my colleagues. Thank you to my colleagues Carol, Gordon, and the kind words from our celebrant of the day, Colleen Kendall. Look after one another, enjoy one another, be good to one another. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for another wonderful piece of work. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you. That'll be hopefully get a chance to watch.